You're watching a replay of Brain Drain with Rich Cabaceres. For more videos just like this, hit that red subscribe button.
And good morning, you're listening to Brain Drain on the legendary 1480 WSAR. I'm Rich Cabaceres, coming to you live for another show where you can watch on WSAR.com, Spindle City Auto Glass Studio Cam. You can watch us on the J&J Jewelers Facebook Live Cam by going to your Facebook page, typing in Brain Drain with Rich Cabaceres, and getting us live where you can comment below and join the conversation. Also, you can get us on the TuneIn Radio app, absolutely free, on your cell phone. Download it. You can listen to us anywhere in the world, Monday through Thursday, 9 to 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we've got an action-packed show today. We're talking about your government and what it takes to let your voice be heard in government, how much it costs to let your voice be heard in government, because we've been talking for the past week about things like the school shooting. Yesterday, the opioid epidemic came up, and we asked the question constantly, how come it feels that our government officials aren't listening to us? And when you really look at what is being done by the people who the government is supposed to represent and what happens by the corporations, you really start raising some eyebrows on why everything operates the way that it actually does. So in 2017, $3.34 billion, that's right, billion with a B, was spent on lobbying. $3.34 billion. That was for people to go into the Capitol Hill. That was for people to go into various places and get these congressmen and senators, these representatives and senators, to do things that they felt that they needed to get done. $3.34 billion. And out of that, let's see who the top spenders were. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce spent $82 million. National Association of Realtors, $54 million. Business Roundtable, $27 million. Pharmaceutical Research Manufacturers, $25 million. Blue Cross Blue Shield, $24 million. American Hospital Association, American Medical Association, 22 and 21 respectively. Alphabet Inc. And here are some interesting people on here. AT&T, Boeing, Dow DuPont, Comcast, Lockheed Martin, Southern Corporation, Oracle. You have all these different organizations who are purchasing politicians with millions and millions of dollars. The bottom on the list was Oracle, and they spent $12 million in 2017 alone to be able to convince politicians that their idea was the right way. So really, when you look at how is it possible to spend $12 million on pushing some legislation, you really have to ask some great questions on why they want to spend this much. How does it benefit their companies? How does it benefit their organizations? The interesting part about this is I don't really see anybody here on this list. There is the, let's see, we have the, There is Open Society Policy Center. They spent $16 million, but they're more so pushing for foreign rights, people who are dealing with issues in other countries, and they're not really focusing on issues that are happening here in the United States. So really, when you look at this stuff, it makes you ask, who are our politicians listening to? Are they listening to us, or are they listening to the average person who is a lobbyist? Because they should be listening to the average person as a whole, but instead, unfortunately, it seems to be the lobbying firms that they're listening to. And there's no clearer indication of that than this recent school shooting. There's no clearer indication of that than the fact that they can't wrap their heads around this opioid epidemic. Why? Well, maybe one of the reasons is because Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers of America spent $25 million in 2017 to make sure that they're not focusing on things like the opioid epidemic. Maybe they're, instead of focusing on things like marijuana as part of pain mitigation treatment or help towards curing cancer, they're focusing on how can we give them more pills to keep people addicted longer. This is scary because your government is supposed to represent you. And time again, it seems like the rights are being taken away and the power is being taken away from the average person, and it's going to large corporations or large entities who spend lots and lots and lots of money on politicians living the high life. So again, $3.34 billion was spent on lobbying in 2017. And when you think about how many households there are in the United States, it's 116 million households. And of those households, close to 50% of them make less than $30,000 a year. So if you actually look at how much it would actually cost for the average person to mount that much money so we can have a say again, the average household at 116 million would cost somewhere around $30 a person. Then or $30 a household. Then you add the fact that about 30 to 50% of those people are going to be gone because they can't afford to give that much money. They can't afford to give $30. The number continues to increase. So really, when you look at, if you're able to afford to contribute to the political process, which you shouldn't have to, but if you're able to afford to, it's going to cost about $100 per household. That's $100 that could go towards food. That's $100 that could go towards your way of life. And instead, it'd have to go to government, on top of the fact that they're supposed to go and represent you. So on top of your tax dollars, on top of the various ways that they've figured out to take money from your paycheck, whether it be through income tax, whether it be through gas tax, whether it be through some type of federal tax that, like real estate tax or insurance or all these various things that you're paying federal income taxes and state income taxes on, that is what it would take. An additional amount of money just to be able to have the influence of your politicians. And that's a shame. Because I'm of the opinion, you know what? If our politicians aren't in the interest of serving us, then maybe they don't deserve our tax dollars. Because the whole reason why the United States was built was taxation with representation. And, you know, for a long time, people were arguing about whether we should be taxed at all. And we realized that at some point in time during the New Deal that federal tax dollars had to increase to make sure that something like the Great Depression wouldn't happen again. But the question becomes, again, should we have to pay more than we pay in taxes to get our government to listen to us? I pose that question to you, 508-673-1480. And the big question is, how much does it cost to get your elected officials to actually listen to you? Because you're spending tons and tons of money on taxes right now. A majority of your paycheck, or not majority of it, but a good portion of your paycheck is going towards taxes. Paying federal tax, paying state income tax, paying federal income tax, obviously. Paying things like capital gains, paying things like interest on paying things on interest that you earn in banks and on stocks and bonds, and you're asking yourself, why am I paying so much in federal income taxes and state income taxes if my government isn't even really listening to me? So you can even test this at the local level. You can test this at the state level. If you look at the people who your state officials and your local officials really care about, it's the people who go to their fundraisers. So then otherwise, all they do is just enough to get elected. They make it look like something is benefiting you when really it isn't. And there's no clearer case in point of that than what's happening with this whole atrocity of trying to find funding for this school that we have in Fall River, Massachusetts. So when we ask, why do we have to kind of spend money above and beyond, it's because it's necessary. But unfortunately, one of the issues is the reason why this is happening right now is because there was a lack of fiscal planning. And just like you have to go out there and you have to go and you have to create a budget and you have to plan for the next year. Well, government doesn't have to do that because why? They think they have a piggy bank that is just open and can continue to get contributed to. So, yes, we do have to spend more money on the school. It's important that we do it. But shouldn't we start holding our government to a higher standard? Shouldn't we start holding our federal government, our state government, our local government to a higher standard than just saying, hey, we're going to budget year to year, and if something big comes up down the road, we'll just ask the people who pay the taxes for more money. Oh, and by the way, when we create average policy, it's not going to benefit the average person. It's going to benefit my friends who donate to my campaigns. That's crazy. But that's what happens at every single level. And there's no clearer indication of this than what recently just happened at the school with the school shooting in Parkland. What recently just happened with the shooting in Las Vegas. What's happened with school shootings previously. We know we have to do something about this. And unfortunately, our politicians focus on the symptoms because the symptoms play to their audiences, right? So you have people who continue to talk about mental illness is the reason why people are killing people. Or video games and violent TV is the reason why people are dying. Or the even better one is guns are the reason why people are dying. Well, how about this? People are the reason why people are dying when it comes to school shootings, when it comes to mass shootings, when it comes to terrorism. It's people. People are the reason why people are dying. It's not video games. It's not mental illness. It's not guns. It's people. So we need to stop. We need to stop right now. And pointing at these objects that people are using as tools. And we need to start fixing the issue. I'm fed up with it. I really, really am. I don't know how else to say it. I'm fed up with us pointing at these objects that people are using, and they would use another object if that object wasn't in place, to justify why people are killing. It's people. It's our society. We as a whole have messed up. We as a whole need to do more. Because again, the research shows, if you look at the research, not opinions, if you look at the research, every single person who's become an extremist in one way, shape, or form started because they felt like an outcast. They feel like society pushed them away. And unfortunately, there are groups that are preying on exactly that. There are groups that are specifically looking for people who are weak, who feel like they're down and out, who are contemplating suicide, and mobilizing those folks to commit suicide for them, to put their life on the line for them. So really, maybe we need to adjust. Maybe this generation of everybody gets a participation trophy didn't work. Maybe it didn't. How about that? Because one thing that's happening is there's more and more school shootings happening now than happened 40 years ago, than happened 50 years ago, that happened probably ever in American history. As far back as I can look, there's more happening right now. We're talking about one every 2 days that school is in session. So really, what can we do to solve this problem? Because unfortunately, I think the politicians don't want to look at it and say, hey, we messed up for the past 20 years and we need to fix something. You know, actively getting people to participate and actively making everybody feel like even though they lost, they won something, hasn't worked. If anything, it's enabled them to do this stuff more so. So maybe we have to change our society. Maybe we have to kill this snowflake idea where people melt under pressure. Maybe we need to give people more pressure as life goes on. So that way they can deal with the real world once they get exposed to it. Because we can take it the most recent situation with Nicholas Cruz, who walked into a school, killed 17 people, and shot the place up. Nobody stopped him. And he was 19 years old. 19 in high school. 19 years old. So there's a red flag right there. He was just expelled, pushing him away, making him an outcast. So what are we doing to make sure that this outcast doesn't become an active shooter? We did nothing. And we continue to do nothing. You know why? Because people like Donald Trump are pointing to the crazy people, these wackos. You know what? There are a lot of people who have mental illness. There's a lot of people out there in this country who are dealing with mental illness right now. And when the President of the United States says these wackos, who does that affect? But also, there are a lot of gun owners out there. There are a lot of people who have played video games, and a lot of those people are younger than 30 years old. My generation, I would say anybody under 40 years old, grew up on video games. And to say that video games are the reason why people are becoming violent is absurd. And anybody under 40 years old who hears you make that argument is going to look at you and say, you're nuts. Because I haven't committed crimes, and majority of the people I know haven't committed crimes, and we used to hang out and play these video games. We used to go around and beat each other up and play Manhunt. And we used to go around and play these video games online with each other. And if you're saying this is the reason why people are killing, you're insane. People are saying guns. There are millions and millions of gun owners in the United States. And guess what? They're not going out and killing people. It's a small portion of the people who own guns who are going out and killing people. So tell me, why? Why do we continue to make these crap arguments that benefit only the people who are contributing to these lobbying firms? Somebody says, where's the guarantee that if you pay more in taxes, then they'll listen? You know, that's a great question. And you know, I'm saying that if you in order to get your government to listen to you, you have to pay above and beyond taxes. You have to give them contributions, campaign contributions that are larger than the actual corporations who are making sure that your interests are not represented. Somebody else says that my feathers are in a ruffle, and you know, they are. Because I'm tired of the conversation where our political operatives are not, or the people we put into office are not representing us. You're live on the legendary 1480 WSIR. What say you?
Hey, how we doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
Not too bad. Hey, did you get your Census Bureau thing in the mail?
I haven't looked at it yet, actually.
Oh, you have? Oh, you better look at it. You only told Mark to send it in.
Yeah. Yeah,
well, hey,
and you know,
tell you something. In it, for your time, your 15 minutes of filling it out, they're giving you $1. There's $1 in it.
How about that? You know what? There's your tax dollars at work.
You know what I did? I'm not filling it out. I'm not sending it in. And I'm going to take the $1 and put it in an envelope with a little note telling them, you clean me out now just about every year, so you might as well take the $1 back.
Well, you know what?
I'm going to do it.
You know what? And if the government had to spend the money on having the person going around...
But it's a survey for the census.
Right.
And all the questions on it, from what I see, is it's looking for new ways to what you're going to be susceptible to being plucked for.
Well, I actually use census data a lot of the time to come up with the information to talk about on this show. So census data is very important to somebody like me.
I know it is.
And the reason is because it allows me to point out some of the problems. And one of the big problems is we have $3.34 billion that were spent by lobbying groups. And in order for you to be able to mount that kind of attack against lobbying groups, you would have to spend a lot more than your tax dollars.
The billions of dollars that disappeared with the Pentagon. But nobody wants to talk about it or look for it.
And here's the interesting part about this. You already spend that kind of money in taxes, but unfortunately the government feels that that money is due to them. They feel that they deserve that money just by the very nature of us living in this country. Well, you know what? There's nothing in the Constitution that says that we have to pay taxes. How about we all stop paying taxes?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to send them. This survey, to me, was like they're looking for new ways to pluck us.
Yeah.
And to see how intelligent you are about it.
You know, it's interesting. And, you know, thank you for your perspective on the census.
Hey, but I'm going to tell you, I'm sending it back, and the dollar bill doesn't even have a wrinkle in it.
So it's right off the press. It's you know what?
So
the funny part about that is,
put it in the envelope and send it back to them.
It was printed fresh from the mint, and it was probably used with inflation dollars.
Mine's got a 2013 date on it.
And it was probably used with inflation dollars that is really making you poorer in turn. That dollar is actually making you $2 poorer. Have a great day.
All right.
You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Good morning.
How you doing today?
Good. Yourself?
Not bad.
What I'd like to say about the guns is the guns they're talking about are banned in Massachusetts.
You're right.
Okay? We have a very strong gun policy.
Okay.
Not that it doesn't need improving. There's always something to be tweaked. And the other thing about Fall River, at least our high school, they have 5 security guards during the daytime on duty at all times.
You're right.
Okay? And they also have them for night school.
But here's
not 5, but 3.
Here's the bigger question. Do you think that banning assault rifles solves the problem? or do you think it's just solving the symptom to the problem? So are we treating this?
I think it solves the problem of
so
19-year-old buying them.
So here's a question, the bigger question: are we fixing a symptom like many of the pharmaceutical drugs do, which is, by the way, the fourth largest donor in lobbying money in the United States in 2017?
I agree with that.
Or are we solving the problem? Because unfortunately, we've been programmed to solve the symptoms of problems or the signs of problems. And the reason is because those are the things that we see as opposed to diving in and figuring out what the actual problem is.
One of the things in Massachusetts, I don't know if you're aware of, if I get a prescription from my doctor, the state pharmacy association has a cross-track. So if I buy it at CVS and then I go, say, Rite Aid, that's on record that I already have that prescription. I don't know if you knew that.
Okay.
Massachusetts has some very good mechanisms.
You're right. They do have a mechanism where you can monitor prescription. We can monitor prescription drugs that doctors have prescribed. But again, we're talking about kind of the overall national issue. So one of the things that I think is important is that we have, say, background checks into mental capacity. Or
no, we don't.
Nobody has that, and the reason is HIPAA.
Right.
And the sad part is, people are able to then acquire a gun and use that gun in act of violence. But there are a lot of people who are just pushed, regardless if they had mental illness or not. There's a lot of people who are pushed over the edge because they're an outcast. They're made to be an outcast, and they're trying to gain their power back. So how do we solve that problem? How do we solve it?
You need it by legitimate counselors. You need to bring people who feel like they're outcast into the system.
That's part of it right there.
Okay, that's part of it. I mean, you look at Fall River, where we have a school. I won't say what school it is, that if you're considered a troublemaker, they send you to that school. And I don't believe in that.
And I think that is the beginning of the problem. We naturally, as a society, and I think this happens in every society, we naturally, as a society, feel that people who are different than us should be segregated from us. And then it takes a lot of work to get people to feel inclusive.
Correct. So I totally agree with you on that.
So really, what we have to do is we have to stop excommunicating people. And I'm using a religious term on purpose, because this idea that because people are different from us, they can't be with us is a problem.
It's a big problem.
When we start pointing towards things and saying that because we don't understand this, it must be evil, that's part of the problem.
Correct. If you recall years ago, I mean, I'm probably twice as old as you, but when I was going to school, they had Ruggles, and then they had a school for girls that they considered special needs, that they didn't fit in, they were troublemakers. And that was supposed to end. It did end for a long time. And then they recreated this alternative school. And the other thing I don't believe in, they have different levels. And in fact, I remember when my kids went to Morin.
Leveling, yes.
They had the Red House, which was who's who, and then they had a house that you're just somebody else.
And that's part of it, is this whole leveling concept, and that's going away. Leveling is going away. But this idea that some people are better than others because of their mental capacity is part of the problem, because everybody can contribute to society, right?
Correct. I mean, I totally agree with what the only thing I want to do is try and do here is on a state level. We have some very good politicians. Our Attorney General is one of the toughest people on gun control.
Okay.
She's not being influenced by the NRA.
Okay. And is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I don't think Baker is. I don't really know. I've never looked at his campaign finance reports. But I don't think he would even have the power to go over our state reps.
So here's the issue. You're right. the Attorney General of Massachusetts is not being influenced by the NRA, but she is being influenced by a lot of the other dollars that are coming in from left-wing organizations and using those dollars to be able to fight her fight or spend money on meals or all this other stuff that could potentially be those lobbying dollars could be spent towards.
Well,
so,
I agree with you on that.
So
but
really,
you have to remember,
as opposed to pointing towards guns, maybe the answer is pointing towards people. The issue is when people do that, they don't get elected
mental
office.
health. I mean, they closed Bridgewater State Hospital, which was for the mentally ill.
Mm-hmm.
And not just for somebody with guns, but had real mental issues. Corrigan is so overburdened, people can't even get there to get help.
Hey, I want to thank you so much for your call. Have a great day. You made some very good points, and I appreciate the conversation.
Have a good day.
You too. So, really, when we dive into it, really, when we look at the entire kind of conundrum of what is causing extremism, what's causing school shootings, what is causing people to die from the opioid epidemic, what is causing poverty, it's an action of your government. It's an action of people who are supposed to be representing you. And part of the reason is $3.34 billion was spent in lobbying money from major corporations and special interests. That was above and beyond tax dollars. So in order to be able to compete with that, you have to go and spend money above and beyond the taxes that you spend every single year. But you can't afford it, can you? The average person right now in the United States is living paycheck to paycheck. Right now. So how are you going to spend the additional $50, $60, $70, $100 to let the average person be heard in government? How is that going to happen? You can't. And here's why you can't. Because the system is stacked up against you. So you know what I say? Rather than doing something like that, why don't we start saying we're going to keep our tax dollars? You're not representing us. This is taxation without representation. We're going to keep our tax dollars. You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. What say you?
Good morning, Rich. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Good. It's taxation with lobizitation.
Well done.
George Soros is behind all of this. There's 30 corporations that he has. How these kids raise this money so quick. Somebody posted on some Facebook, I read. Somebody posted up something. How do these kids get these money so quick? I'm like, George Soros.
No. Here's the thing about this. So you're right. It might have been George Soros, and that's fine. But the thing is it's happening on the opposite side too with the Koch brothers. So there are billionaires.
Soros actually literally destroyed countries. Rich, you know what I mean? He actually collapsed their economy.
But here's the thing. The thing is it's happening on both sides. Both parties have people who are billionaires who are spending money on mobilizing people to get in the news. And really, all it's done is it caused extreme right and extreme left ideals. Instead of figuring out how we can solve our issues, this extremism on the right and the left of politics is part of the reason why we are where we are. If we could come to a conclusion about how to help people who feel like outcasts, we wouldn't be dealing with this, or we would be able to reduce it drastically. Instead, people are pointing towards video games and guns, and people are pointing towards mental illness as the reason.
I just think that's mental illness. Yes, that's something we need funding for. That's its own entity. I've known people that struggle with mental illness their whole lives, and some people go through certain trauma, Rich, and they never get over it. And this Facebook group's out there, but it's like I asked you in the callers, how do we tackle this issue? I'm glad, because all this is pretty much tied together with the mental illness. There should be an office where you could go to if you're feeling angry, if you're feeling depressed, if you're feeling lonely, almost like a no-name anonymous. You go in there, there's already a counselor waiting, and there shouldn't be people around in that area. You should just go to that area, be able to go, cool down, and talk to somebody, because that's the key, Rich, with mental illness. You got to be able to talk to somebody. If there's nobody to talk to, you're going to end up acting out on that anger, that depression, that anxiety, whatever it might be. You're going to act out on that. But it's important for these schools to implement some kind of psychologist that's always there we got to kind of think out of the box.
Thank you so much.
We have to think out of the box, Rich.
Thank you so much for your opinion.
Thank you,
I really appreciate it. Have a great day. And somebody on Facebook Live says, the only solution is to take money out of politics. I disagree that it's a left versus right thing. It's a rich versus poor thing. And the rich are putting us against one another, against left versus right lines, religious versus atheist, pro-choice versus pro-life, etc., etc. And, you know, it's very interesting because people, as a society, tend to like one or the other arguments because it's easy to wrap your head around. But when you talk about people getting shot because of school shootings, it's more than just this or that. It's a complex issue that we need to come up with a complex solution towards. And the only way that we do that is by getting our politicians to work. And, you know, I think that part of it is they don't think that our taxation dollars are something that we're giving to them to do their job. They think that that's something that's necessary to do for government to function. And maybe we need to re-educate them on that. You're live in a legendary 1480 WSAR. What say you?
You know, you're putting, thank God we live in Massachusetts that these guns are banned. In Rhode Island, the governor just asked the legislature to draft legislation to ban them there, too. I mean, if you don't have a gun, you can't do it. This kid was 19 years old. Did he have any brothers and sisters?
We just had a guy just stab somebody in Massachusetts, in Winchester. We just had a guy.
Did he have any brothers and sisters, this kid?
I don't know.
I don't think he did because they don't mention him. But if you were 19, everybody's branding this kid a crackpot. Well, he had mental issues. I don't like that term, crackpot. He had severe mental issues. But put yourself in his position. If you were 19 years old and you were the only child and you had both your parents die on you within a short period of time, how would that affect you?
So what's stopping them?
How would that affect you?
Sure, it'd have an impact on me, but you're talking about...
But he didn't keep it a secret.
But
he asked for help.
But he's not the average person. That's the issue. The average person who's doing exactly what we're talking about felt like an outcast, and how do we prevent that from happening? So here's the thing. Here's the thing. He could have. Wait. You're gonna let me.
A comment. Oh, you need an AR-15 for protection.
Wait. I didn't say that.
Yeah, you said that the other day.
Yes, I did.
What purpose do they serve? Oh, protection.
So first of all,
in bed in a sound sleep, and somebody tries to break in, you're not going to be able to get up. Go get that gun. Put the magazine in and head them off. They're going to be on you before you can do that. A can of bear spray is better protection than a gun in that situation.
Not necessarily. And
well, you know,
wait.
Those are implements of war.
And if you let me, finish.
Thank God these states like Mass and Rhode Island realize that.
Listen, I want to have a conversation with you. I appreciate that you disagree with me, and I want to hear what you have to say. But listen. I need to have the opportunity to be able to talk too. So it doesn't just take a gun to kill people. He could have walked in with pipe bombs and killed people that way. He could have walked in with some type of chemical agent and killed people. You know why they're not doing that? Because they're not suicidal. So if we had the ability to rein them in, we would be able to solve this problem. Instead, we continue to attack a symptom of the problem than the actual problem. And we continue to tackle guns, which makes absolutely no sense. We're going to go right back to the lines. You're live in the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Good morning, Rich. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
Not too bad. It's a nice 50 degrees today.
Oh man, you know, I need to get out there at some point in time, check you guys out.
Yeah, come out and enjoy the nice weather. But listen, the reason I called, so there's really 2 points and 2 sides to the story. The first one is, addressing that we have an issue with gun violence and safety in schools. And the second part of the issue is what politically is being done to fix that or change it. As far as the gun violence goes, I kind of agree with your last caller. I think at the end of the day, if someone who is mentally ill, because we can't eradicate mental illness will never go away. It's a thing that exists. It's not something we can get rid of. But what we can do is change how mentally ill people have access to weapons. That's something we can absolutely affect and change. And so I agree with your last caller that if the young man did not have access to an AR-15, I don't think there would be 17 dead kids.
Now, here's the issue. does that solve the problem? And I don't think mental illness is the problem either, because when you look at what causes an extremist, down to a person, they all felt like outcasts. So we're not solving the problem. Solving the gun violence in schools is just a symptom of the problem, because what stops them from going in with a knife or creating a bomb or something along those lines once we take their guns away from them?
I mean, you're absolutely right. And, you know, we're looking at symptoms. You are correct. All you can really do as far as, you know, that's concerned is just anti-bullying. I mean, you can't force people to change their behavior. I hate to say it, but most young kids who are in high school are not the nicest people in the world. You know, not to say that they shouldn't be nice, but the fact of the matter is how you can't force them to do that. You can do anti-bullying campaigns. I think kids who are in high school are nicer now than the kids who used to be in high school, you know, 20 and 30 and 40 years ago.
But maybe part of the problem is the societal programming that we've done for these folks, which is treat everybody like they're a winner, even if they haven't won. So now they're not equipped to go into high school and deal with adversity.
You know what, maybe? I think one of the huge factors is social media, where,
I think
you know,
that's fair.
all of a sudden everybody has a soapbox. And when you're 15 years old, 16, 17 years old, you know, you don't always have the most well-formed thoughts, but you have that soapbox regardless. So when you say, you know, hey, I don't like, you know, John in the cafeteria, and you go on Facebook and blow him up, all of a sudden you have, you know, 300 other people in the school that know, you know, hey, I don't like this guy John, and these are the reasons why, and he sucks, and so on and so forth. And I think that plays a big part in it.
You know,
but,
I'll let you make your final point because the lines are lit up right now and we're going into the news, so go for it.
The only other thing I wanted to add is, as far as the other part of the picture is concerned, doing, you know, getting things changed politically, the only thing you can really do is look at campaign finance reform, because if you're getting, you know, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year from the NRA or any organization, you're going to enact legislation that benefits them, and you're going to stop legislation that does not benefit them. And that's all I really have to say. Thanks, Rich.
I agree with you 100% about campaign finance. Have a great day. You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. We have 40 seconds until we go into the news break.
I'll be quick. I wasn't around yesterday. I don't know if you talked about it, but I'm sure you heard about it. How about that poor girl in Winchester, Massachusetts, studying to be in the medical field? She was stabbed on Saturday afternoon in broad daylight.
Right. Stabbed. Not
That's
shot,
terrible.
stabbed.
I take my grandsons to the library many Saturdays.
You got it. And
that was a terrible situation.
And thank you so much for your point, because that's the people are looking for any reason to lash out. It's not necessarily just using a gun.
And the guy was mental.
Thank you so much. Have a great day. Right now, because we are talking about what your government can do to do their jobs. Whether we should be funding the government to do their jobs above and beyond what we pay them in taxes. Because right now, there's $3.34 billion that was spent in 2017 by big corporations to push their interests above and beyond tax dollars. So what does it take to actually make sure that you, as a person, can let your voice be heard? And there's no clearer indication of that than the fact that nothing has been done about these school shootings. People are pointing towards guns, and they're pointing towards video games, and they're pointing towards mental illness as the reason why this exists, instead of pointing at the actual problem instead of the symptoms of the problem. And the problem is that people feel like outcasts, and more people are lashing out through extremism, whether it be flying planes into burning into buildings, whether it be blowing themselves up, whether it be putting white hoods on and marching in the KKK. They're doing all these various things to become extremists because they're being mobilized once you make them an outcast. So we need to solve societal problems, and instead people are pointing at symptoms of the problems. You're live in the legendary 1480 WSAR. What say you?
Well, good morning, sir.
Good morning. How are you doing today?
It's a beautiful day.
So, what say you?
What do I say? I hope you don't mind me asking this. Did you like Alf as a kid?
I did like Alf as a kid.
All right, that's good.
Why, do I sound like Alf? Is that what you're saying?
No. My son's the same age as you.
Oh, yeah?
You loved Alf.
So how does your son feel about this?
Well, my son doesn't have any comprehension of it.
Okay.
Listen, I probably could use that new psychiatric place over in Dartmouth.
Okay.
But you gotta go to the right hospital to go there. You gotta get in within that network. You understand how it works?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how it works. But anyway, I think this kid could get an AR-15 faster than he can get a bottle of Percocet.
And I disagree with that because actually, if he has the
Go
money,
ahead.
he can get a bottle of Percocet because
Sure.
Percocet is going for
off
what?
the street.
Yeah, you got it. But that's the point right there. Is if you take guns away from people, people are still going to get guns. They're just going to get them illegally.
All right. So Washington basically won't take up anything with gun control. How about a person that's out of control with a gun?
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. Should we have better background checks? Absolutely. But the point to guns as being the sole reason why this is a problem is erroneous. And to take guns away from people because less than 1% of the people who have guns...
You keep on saying taking guns away, man. And nobody's going to take anybody's guns away.
Well, they're talking about taking away the AR-15.
What they should do is put a little nip in it and say, when you're 18 and you have some issues like this young man had or anyone else, you're not going to get one. You have anger issues. You think that's going to be a good thing? I don't think it's a good thing. As a parent, I mean, would I want my kid that has some real issues getting a gun like this with that type of caliber? It's ridiculous. We're going to come to this and keep on arguing.
It's funny
we
because...
have our different points of view in life. I'm watching a bridge right now that goes to nowhere being repaired.
And, I actually enjoy talking to you every time because I can have a conversation with you. And, a lot of people agree with the way that you feel about how we shouldn't have some of these high-powered rifles because what do you need?
This one really bothers me. It really bothers me a lot. So, some of the other ones, I got over it quickly. This one's, got a hold of me. Like I just said, my tax dollars is, we're repairing a bridge to nowhere. Stone Bridge is being repaired finally, after 27 years of living in town.
And it's funny that you say that because you feel like your tax dollars are being spent erroneously, and I'd argue that when we're not focusing on the major issues, then I think all of our tax dollars, and when politicians are using the lobbying dollars to justify their actions as opposed to the tax dollars that we pay for them, maybe we should reevaluate why we pay taxes.
The lobbyists and our politicians hand in hand,
Thank you so much for your call. Have a great day.
Take care.
You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. What say you?
Hey, I'm going to change the subject, if you don't mind.
Okay.
The unions are dead.
Okay. And actually, this is on subject because we're talking about lobbying firms and how they spend money in Washington.
The unions are dead. Trump has made sure of that.
Okay.
Even if a person is not in the union, doesn't pay dues, you still have to represent them. They're called the free riders.
Okay.
And the unions are not going to be able to survive without the dues.
And do you think that's a bad thing or a good thing?
I think it's a bad thing. I've been a union guy for 30 years. I was a union rep.
Okay, because lobbying dollars, a lot of unions and collective bargaining groups spend tons of money on lobbying. And they usually are involved in a lot of special interest groups to go towards politicians.
Like this guy, he's got the Supreme Court stacked. He's stacking it now. I mean, I don't see no future for him.
I think that's a fair concern that you have, especially being somebody from the
like I said, if I was in that situation as a business agent, I would fight for these guys with one hand tied behind my back.
It's scary when you think about if you're a union person and what's happening to unions and how they're being vilified.
Oh, we're getting crushed.
Thank you so much for your call.
Yeah.
Have a great day. You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Good morning, Rich.
How you doing?
I'm doing well. I got to agree with the previous call. I was going to go in a different direction, but unions are being crushed. This man who pretended to be a populist, and that's a pretend, is the biggest corporatist, globalist we have ever had in the White House.
Okay.
But I guess that's what they like. And as for, I felt the earth shook a little bit when George Soros' name was mentioned.
Okay.
Because obviously these kids are so stupid they can't get it straight. And George Soros is going to manipulate them. But at the same time, we're not willing to say one of the richest men in the world, the man from Vlad, didn't influence our election.
So here's the thing.
Yeah, go for
I'd
it.
argue that all of us are being manipulated. We're being manipulated by Fox News and by CNN and by MSNBC. And the reason why we're being manipulated by them is because they're making tons and tons of money by simply trying to get us tuned in to controversy. And because of that,
money.
And because of that, politicians have become extremists. They've been extreme right, they've been extreme left, and they don't want to work together, which is not helping our government improve. And there's no clearer indication of that than what's happening with the $3.34 billion and why they're focusing on stupid things that are very, very trivial as opposed to figuring out how to stop kids killing people.
Well,
or stop people
I'm going to say something about in terms of the AR-15. You know, first off, not all of us are trying to take away all the guns. So that's just not true. Off the table. You know, you say we don't treat the symptom, we got to treat the disease. Well, you know, if I'm a surgeon, a doctor, you come into my office with a heart attack. The heart attack may be the result of you smoking 4 packs a day. Am I going to lecture you about the 4 packs per day or treat your heart attack?
So here's the thing. The part of the reason why you're smoking. The part of the reason why you're smoking.
Excuse me. Which one?
You know, I'm trying to have a conversation with you, and if you allow me to finish, then we can do that. Have a great day. So one of the issues when you go to the doctors is you go to the doctor's office and they tell you, hey, you got this from smoking 4 packs a day. But the doctors are probably thinking, if we changed our society, this person probably wouldn't have smoked 4 packs a day. If corporations weren't allowed to spend tons and tons and tons of money on marketing, they may have never got their hands on tobacco, or they may not have been interested in tobacco. And as many people wouldn't be dying from things like lung cancer. You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. What say you? Hello.
Hello?
Good morning. How you doing?
Hey, good morning. How are you? I wasn't sure if I was actually on or not.
Yeah, you're on. Good morning. How you doing today?
I'm doing really well, thank you. So I'm listening to the conversation for a while right now. I was actually commenting on Facebook Live there, and it's a lot of opinions out there. Let's start off with the fact that the Second Amendment wasn't built for people defending themselves in their home or against robbers or anything. It was built in order. It was written in order to ensure that people have a right to overthrow a tyrannical government. And what the type of weapon is, or whether it's a handgun, whether it's a musket back in the 1700s, whether it's an AR-15 today, that right is a right. That's been upheld by Heller versus Columbia in 2008.
Right.
That's been off the table in terms of trying to ban guns. So we need to get that out there first and foremost. I'm going to say the very heartless thing that most people will probably think is very controversial. That is the cost of freedom. The fact that people can take advantage of these weapons and then go and do a shooting. The fact that they can go and rob people. The fact that they can use these weapons for nefarious, evil deeds. Now, moving forward, how do we solve the problem? So obviously, as an honest person, how do you stop gun violence? You get rid of the guns, plain and simple. But unlike other countries, you do have a constitutional right to own these guns. So how do we mitigate the problem? How do we find solutions that prevent people from entering a school and shooting it? How do we find solutions of, like you said, making sure that people don't feel outcast and shoved off to the sides, to the peripheral? How do we build an economy that works for people so that we don't have hundreds of millions of people who are in despair, who are working dead-end jobs, who are working minimum wage jobs, who are angry at the society that has screwed them over for so long? And this is the conversation we need to be having. A lot of people are just blinded by the knee-jerk reaction, by we have a school shooting, mainstream media jumps on it, you have a media storm over it for weeks and starts forgetting about it until the next incident.
Right.
How do we attack the societal problems that breed these situations that occur?
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I want to go back to one of the initial statements that you made, though, about the Second Amendment. So I believe, and I'll read the Second Amendment just for everybody who listens, and I did this a lot yesterday. A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And the part that you talked about, to the security of a free state. So I think when they wrote the Second Amendment, they didn't mean to overthrow a tyrannical government, but they also meant if somebody tries to come and impede on what's ours, if another country tries to come in and take us over, we can stand up for ourselves. But the second piece to that is, I also think the reason why they use the word free state is not just in essence of the country, but they meant our state, as in our personal state, meaning that we have the ability to live freely.
Exactly. Exactly.
So I think
And
that's
it could go-
maybe why
yeah.
the Supreme
Sorry, keep
Court
going.
felt the way that they felt. But I'm sorry, make your point.
No, I mean I agree 100%. Exactly, that's exactly the point. That states, by the way, can be a state like Florida, where I'm from, or a state like Massachusetts, where we're from, or the state which is the United States of America. That is a state. You can also argue that the state is your own domicile. This is your own home. It's your property. It's your right to live freely.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think they like I agree with you 100%. That is why they concluded that limiting and banning certain weapons and limiting people from being able to get weapons is unconstitutional. You know, people argue, well, we had a terrorist attack, so now we have no-fly lists, right? People can land on this arbitrary no-fly list, which I think is ridiculous.
It
and
is
wrong
ridiculous.
in so many ways. But flight isn't a constitutional right. Free travel is. Free transportation is, meaning if you want to travel from state to state, no one is hindering you. You can't be on a no-drive list or a no-bus list. So they work the system in a way to have these kind of knee-jerk reactions and these things that they can come to the people with and say, look, we did something in order to prevent potential hijackers from getting on a plane and doing it again. I think it's wrong, but that's a different argument. But once again, we can't ignore the fact that the Second Amendment is a right. It's not something that is up for interpretation anymore. It's been decided on many times, and we can't ignore that.
Now, to bring up your next point, which you said that we need to do more to figure out the societal problem, I agree with you wholeheartedly. You're 100% on point, and unfortunately, our politicians, I don't believe, are equipped to do such. And part of the reason is because $3.34 billion is being spent from special interests to make sure that they're focusing on things that aren't really benefiting the American people at all, except for increasing things like the wage gap, and instead of focusing on how to make sure that companies are making large amounts of dollars off the American people. The fact that you can't sue Monsanto is a problem.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. At the end of the day, if you want to look at how do we start actually having politicians who serve the people, who serve their actual constituents, the only solution, and I mean this, the only solution is money out of politics. There's an organization called the Wolf Pack that they're trying to push the 28th Amendment, which is basically take money out of politics, move to public funding of campaigns, and just make it illegal for private persons, private entities, private corporations, anyone to finance campaigns for politicians.
I love the concept.
That happens. That is when you actually start having politicians serving the constituents, for better or for worse, by the way. Go ahead.
I love the concept, and I want you to share the link on the Facebook Live feed so that way everybody has the opportunity to go to that website. But thank you so much. I really, really appreciate your call. Have a great day.
My pleasure. You too, sir.
Thanks. AR, and we're talking about what actually gets your government to serve you. And is it your vote? Is it the tax dollars that you're spending? Or is it the money above and beyond that's taxes in the $3.34 billion that's spent on lobbying for your government to make decisions for you? And let's talk about some of these top spenders. We have the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the National Association of Realtors, the Business Roundtable, the Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers of America, and then we also have some corporations like Blue Cross Blue Shield. We have AT&T, Boeing. And obviously we had this net neutrality thing that just came up, and that could be a lot of reason why you see companies like AT&T, why you see Comcast on there. But should they be able to spend these dollars above and beyond on your actual politicians? Because your tax dollars should be funding their opinions. Should it be these people who are making thousands and thousands or millions and millions or billions and billions of dollars on really impacting your government? Because there's countless research that shows that your opinion, the opinion of the average person, really doesn't matter to politicians. Because all they're really worried about is doing enough to get elected, and unfortunately the way that people at the federal level, the state level, and the local level get elected is they really get elected by getting enough campaign contributions so they can let their voice be heard. And unfortunately, the almighty dollar rules your political offices. So is that the way that it should be? So I think that this is an important reason and an important symptom of the actual problem, which is why are people feeling like outcasts? So if we make our politicians not actually represent us, and if mainstream media is pushing them to the extremes because that's how they get their TV time. And if corporations are more interested in them making sure that things like marijuana aren't legal, instead of figuring out how to solve the opioid epidemic, then guess what? You're not being represented. The problem still exists, and that problem when it comes to school shootings is that people feel like they're outcasts. That's what all the research is showing. It's not mental illness. It's not video games. It's not violence on TV. It's not guns. It's really the fact that people feel like outcasts. And unfortunately, if you look at the left side of the aisle, and I pointed to my right, but it's your left on the camera. If you look at the left side of the aisle, the left side is pointing towards guns. Guns kill people. You're right. Guns do kill people when it's in a person's hands. And the right side, which I'm going to point to my left, the right side is looking at why mental illness is killing people. Video games are the devil. The violent TV that you see, that's the devil. You know what? I grew up on a game like Grand Theft Auto. And majority of people in my generation, I am considered a millennial or an exennial, but I am considered part of that group. And majority of the people in my generation and the generations that are going to come after mine grew up on video games. And you know what? You don't see me running around the neighborhood shooting people. You don't see me walking into City Hall and shooting people up because I didn't get my way. No. And majority of people won't do that. So to say that people are seeing these images and it's programming them is just absurd. It's simply absurd, and it doesn't treat people like they actually are, which is people. They're treating you like you're able to be programmed. And you know what? Maybe we are able to be programmed. And tell me, do you think that people are able to be programmed? 508-673-1480. All right, and we're going to continue the conversation about whether your government is actually interested in helping with the violence that's happening in these schools, the gun violence that's happening in these schools, with the violence in general that's happening in your schools, whether they're interested in helping to prevent extremism, or whether they're just interested in getting by and getting reelected day to day. You're live and legendary 1480 WSAR. What say you?
What's going on?
How you doing today?
I'm decent.
Decent.
How do I rationalize with people that know nothing about firearms, but I'm supposed to compromise with these folks?
You know, I think that's a fair question. And to do it in a way that is kind of accepting of other people's arguments, I think that we ultimately have to explain what a firearm can and can't do. So what do you say?
Listen to some of these quotes, okay? This is from Hubert Humphrey, a vice presidential candidate, I think, during Johnson. This is back when the Democrats had some type of reason. The right of citizens to bear arms is just one more guarantee against arbitrary government, one more safeguard against the tyranny which now appears remote in America, but which historically has proved to always be possible. Here's another one from Adolf Hitler. The most foolish mistake we could possibly make would be to allow the subjected people to carry arms. History shows that all conquerors who have allowed their subjected people to carry arms have prepared their own fall. Now, back in the time, I'm going to read two more short quotes from the 1780s. One appeared in the Freeman's Journal, and this is what it said. The freemen of America will remember that it is very easy to change a free government into an arbitrary, despotic, or military one, but it is very difficult, almost impossible, to reverse the matter. Very difficult to regain freedom once lost. That was in 1788. And there's one final one from November of 1788 from the Pennsylvania Gazette. While the people have property, arms in their hands, and only a spark of a noble spirit, the most corrupt Congress must be mad to form any project of tyranny. That was written in newspapers of those times, so you know what they meant when they said the right of the people to keep and bear arms.
Now, here's my question. My question to you is the topic about schools and the shootings in schools. Is that about guns, or is it about something greater?
Have you ever seen a parade of guns walk into a school all by their lonesome and start shooting stuff up? You ever seen that?
Maybe on a cartoon.
Exactly.
And you know,
people think that guns are like loose dogs. You Guns don't have a brain. They can't think. There's always some evil behind the gun that wants to do damage to people. I don't want to hurt anybody. But if you tell me I can't have my AR-15 or he can't have his AR-15, which shoots a .223 round, one of the smaller of the so-called assault weapons rounds, then what are you going to do about the AR-10 or the semi-automatics that shoot the 30-06, all bigger rounds? So you start banning the smaller bullet, and of course, if you can't handle the smaller bullet, then you have to ban the larger ones, correct?
I think
the ones that do more damage?
That would be the logical approach if you're able to ban the smaller one. But the argument would be made that that's the weapon of choice. And so they've done things like this before, like sawed-off shotgun, like the Tommy gun. They've done things like this before.
You can't rationalize with these gun grabbers. They think that their little things they know nothing about will create their own utopia. Don't listen to these people. They're void of logic, and they cannot have a serious debate.
So I disagree. I don't think that they're devoid of logic. I think what they're seeing is guns actually shooting and killing people. And when they see that, they say, all right, well, why don't we just take guns out of everybody's hands? But I think it's a lot more complicated than that. And the complication is that guns also are part of keeping us free. Like the First Amendment allows us to speak freely. The Second Amendment makes sure that we still maintain the ability to speak freely.
But they'll say that they will always, in the Second Amendment, it's the right of the people. See? It's the right of the people. They didn't say the right of the person. But in
So to
in
that
the Fourth
point,
Amendment, it says the right of the people to be secure in their person. So if you live by yourself, I guess, you're not secure.
And to
the
that
right of the people peaceably to assemble and petition the government. So if you do it all by yourself, then technically that's unconstitutional.
And the issue is your elected officials love low-hanging fruit. So when they see a school shooting, they say, oh, well, you know what? The Democrats are saying, oh, it's got to be these guns. The guns are the reason, which that's just a symptom of the problem. And then the other group is saying it's video games and it's society and it's TV because they shouldn't be watching that stuff. And it's mental illness, which are also just symptoms of the major problem, which, again, people feel like outcasts. And
we become, as a society, people with the spiritual strength of moths, basically. We can't distinguish between right and wrong anymore. We really don't care to really, truly distinguish between right or wrong. So our spirit and our soul is easily crushed, and our intellect also, it seems. Take care of yourself.
Thank you so much. Have a great day. And you know what? If people are easily confused and they have the spiritual ideas of a moth, and I don't think I could be as linguistic as you were with your statement, because I think it was interesting the way that you said that. I think we're lost. And ultimately, the way that we start taking this back over again is by getting kids, the way that we're seeing these high school kids going to Washington, D.C., but not just going to Washington, D.C. about something that is kind of scratching the surface, but let's educate these kids. Let's spend extra money on education so kids in schools can learn things like philosophy. They can learn things like ethics and morals. They can learn things like civics. They can learn things that really have an impact. And God forbid we bring the arts back into schools. Can you imagine that? If we brought the arts back into schools, what that would do to society? We could have these kids who are well-rounded out once again, who are used to dealing with adversity. Unfortunately, what we're doing right now in schools is we're training kids how to take tests. And if they fail, they've ruined their life. Right? Because the average person, if at least in Massachusetts, this is the way that it works, if you don't pass the standardized test, you're not getting a high school diploma. So when you're a kid, if you're not getting a high school diploma, that's potentially the end of your life. You're going to work at a fast food restaurant for the rest of your life. So really, when you think about it, we're equipping kids to not be able to deal with failure. And because of the fact that all we're doing is saying that they're successful, and then when they fail, we're giving them a participation trophy anyway. You're live on Legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Good morning.
How you doing today?
I'd like to mention one thing that's really some of the callers haven't mentioned is in Nazi Germany. The first thing Adolf Hitler did was disarm the people, which made it much easier for the SS to go in and gather the Jewish people and the atrocities that he was able to perpetrate on them because they had no means to defend themselves. So if here in the United States, which is a right, according to the Bill of Rights in our Constitution, to bear arms, to defend against a dictator or tyrannical regimes, this is Germany all over again.
And isn't that scary? That so again, I want to talk about kind of the Bill of Rights, and I think you can relate to this. When you look at the First Amendment, it's the ability to speak freely, and the Second Amendment helps to protect that First Amendment, but not just to protect the ability to speak freely, but to protect our freedom as a whole in case another country wants to come in or our country decides that they don't want to represent us any longer.
That's true. It could even be tyranny from within with certain individuals.
That's right.
Now, let me just bring up one more point. Adolf Hitler and Joseph Goebbels, through their propaganda machine, were able to manipulate the youth. And if you look at the old footage, what they did, they had the Nazi juniors, they had the junior military, and that's the same thing that seems to be perpetuating. It seems as though history repeats itself. You have all these young youths who really don't know what's going on. They probably don't even know what happened in Nazi Germany. And that could happen in a free society. Are people willing to be blinded by propaganda that they watch on TV news day after day? No. Stand up for your rights. Don't let propaganda machines, the far left in this country, blind people from the truth. And people have to really protect themselves against radical regimes. Who knows? Innocent people. If you look at Nazi Germany, innocent people were taken to the slaughter, killed, atrocities. In the history of mankind, we haven't seen. So my point is, know your rights. And don't let people from the far left to try to dissuade you from reality. We want to protect the innocents, and we want to protect our rights.
Thank you so much for your call. Have a great day. And I don't think that this is a far left, far right issue, or even a right or left issue. I think that this is a freedom issue. Again, unfortunately, it turns into a political issue, and I don't agree with that. But here's a novel thought. Can you imagine if we took money from our defense budget, take the money from our defense budget, and we put it into education so we can extend the learning day until 5 o'clock in the afternoon? So that way kids have access and breaks. They have access to breaks. They have access to civics and arts and, God forbid, anything that's beyond science, technology, English, and math. Can you imagine that? If we had the learning day till 5 o'clock and kids felt accepted because we were actually taking those defense dollars that we're spending on something and we put it towards education. But then we turn around and say, hey, you know what? Part of our freedom is you having a gun. So everybody, let's stop trying to take the rights away from everybody. Let's make sure everybody is equipped, but educated and equipped. How about we do that? How about we make sure that everybody in the United States has an equal opportunity to get an education? There's a great idea. And, I'm going to let you think about that when we go into the last break. So next up, we have our final segment. Right. And somebody says, free education is a human right, just like health care. Somebody says, I hate the far left argument. I'm a Bernie Sanders supporter, and I am an advocate for the Second Amendment. Somebody else is saying, they put fluoride in our water, the same ingredient as Prozac. So we're going to go right back to the calls. Again, this is our final segment, so if we could be brief so we could allow everybody else to speak. You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Hi, Rich. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Good. I want to go back a little bit on your first hour, a little bit real quick. I just want an explanation. I know you mentioned something about government. It's the government's fault that there's poverty. Now, could you explain to me a little bit, elaborate on that topic a minute?
Sure. So, again, I want to be really, really brief. Or we could even pick it up tomorrow, but I just want to give you the concept of, unfortunately, what happens is when you look at what politicians are doing when they're voting at the national level or even the state level, is they're voting for things that are like big business. And you look at the fact that Monsanto can't be sued, but the average person can be. Or you look at Citizens United. Or you look at the fact that we can't wrap our heads around welfare reform because people point fingers at everybody else as opposed to actually solving the problem. I'd argue that's because of the fact that government is in the interest of actually solving poverty.
Okay, so but I think poverty's been around a long time. I mean, it was there before the Depression. I mean, people were poor even the turn of the 20th century, based on people who had all the money. The Vanderbilts and the Rockefellers. I mean, they control a lot of the money in this country. It wasn't because of what government did. Is what certain interests and people who control the money.
And, it's funny that you say that because you're right. There are people who have special interests who are making sure that they're making tons and tons and tons of money. Meanwhile, people on welfare don't have the opportunity to get off welfare because the money that they make off welfare is less than that in which they make on welfare. Thank you so much for your call.
All right.
Have a great day. You're live in the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning.
How you doing today?
Yeah, pretty good. I'm 84 years old. Born in 1934, I grew up in the 1930s and the 1940s. My father came here from Germany as a teenager and loved this country with an unbounded love. The values that I learned in my home was shared by the church and shared by our schools and shared by society at large in our culture. Of course, that's not the case today. We know that I'd say a good family structure, what I want to say, would give us gives a good sense of roots and of belonging, a meaning, and of being responsible for our actions. That gives you an ability to handle the stresses and strains of society. And that's where we're lacking today. We're lacking the good family structure. You look at divorce and kids growing up without a complete family and all that. And that's where our big problem is in our nation today. Now, you brought that up earlier and about society and culture. Well, that's where we are now.
But
now,
I don't think
stress and strain comes along, people break down. They can't handle it.
So I'm going to make a statement, and I'm going to let you make your final point because we want to let other people to come on, and they can join the conversation 508-673-1480. But my statement is I'm a product of divorce, and a lot of people who are in my age bracket are a product of divorce, and society, a majority of Americans, is going by just fine. It's unfortunate, though, that there's a group of people who feel like they're outcasts, and they're actually committing crimes because of that. How does that make you feel?
Well, I'm glad for you. I'm great for you, and you did well. And of course, even in those days, everybody wasn't like that. But I'm saying that the majority of society was like that. You had roots to fall back on, and that's not the case today.
Thank you so much for your points. Have a great day. You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
How you doing?
I think a lot of these comments are very extreme. I don't know of anyone calling for banning guns. I think that will never happen in this country. But I do think that the laws should be tightened. I don't understand why Massachusetts has a set of laws. Florida has a different set of laws.
Okay.
Just like driving a car. You have to go to certain physicals. If you have health issues, you can't be driving a car. But the same laws does not apply to a gun. You can kill a person with a car. You can kill a person with a gun. But, yeah, they have very different regulations.
And, it's funny because a lot of that is because of state sovereignty, and actually the states are supposed to be able to create the laws as opposed to the federal government. But thank you so much because I think that's a great point. I'll let you make your final point, and then we're going to go on to the next caller. So what say you?
I just think we should have responsible rules and regulations for gun ownership. I think we should have physical and mental physicals for gun owners, maybe every 5 years, or to see if something changed, and if you should still have the right to have a gun. Someone with a mental disorder that brings a paper to a psychiatrist or a doctor, and if that doctor does not sign off on it, that person should not own a gun.
Thank you so much for your call. Have a great day.
You too.
And actually, one of the people on Facebook Live says, driving a car isn't a right. Owning a gun is. You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. What say you?
Good morning. I just wanted to talk about your comment about people feeling like outcasts. I think that really is the root of the problem.
I agree.
There's a guy on the radio the other day talking about he's been studying addiction with heroin and opioids for years in Europe, I think Portugal, actually. Years ago, they were failing, so he said, look, we're going to create connection for people who are addicts. They legalized heroin. People could come in, get their injection. They got a good breakfast, job training, and a job. So they had something to live for. And after 15 years, they cut heroin addiction by 50%.
You're right. And how about that? How about if you want to solve the opioid epidemic, you get people social workers and you stop treating them like criminals after they've been put into jail. That would help solve the problem huge.
That was the point he made, is that criminalizing people with drug addictions doesn't solve the problem. It just leads to more addiction and suicide.
Now, I have to cut you short. And I appreciate you calling in, and I know you're out in California. You're probably on your drive to work, so I really, really appreciate you calling in. But we're at the end of our show right now. So
all right, talk to you later.
Thank you so much. Have a great day. And you've been listening to Brain Drain on the legendary 1480 WSAR. I want to leave you with a thought from somebody on the Facebook page. And they said, yep, how about we start investing in people, not big money interests, military-industrial complex, big insurance, big pharma. That's right. How about we invest in our children? How about we invest in education as opposed to killing people? And maybe that will help solve this problem.